That afternoon, as the sun was setting, he received an unexpected message. Peter's era. You didn't destroy a family, Julia. You saved yourself from it. She took a deep breath, looked out the window and replied, and Christmas, Pedro, was just the beginning. The reflection in the glass showed what she had always been, light, even after the fire.
The perfect day that never came. The sun rose shyly behind the glass windows of Carol's room, casting golden reflections on the hanging white dress. She woke with her heart racing, nervousness vibrating in every cell of her body. The bridesmaids laughed in the next room, the scent of flowers filled the air, and the wedding soundtrack was already echoing in her head. Everything seemed perfectly aligned for the most important day of her life. Nothing suggested that fate had something devastating in store. As she sipped her coffee, Carol mentally reviewed every detail: the bouquet of lilies, the decorated hall, the playlist she'd chosen with Raphael. Each memory was accompanied by an anxious smile, a touch of anticipation and love. She believed this wedding wasn't just a ceremony, but the fulfillment of a lifetime of dreams. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from friends wishing her well. But a different notification caught her attention. It was a message from Raphael. A simple line, dry and cold as a blow: "Sorry, I can't do this." The world stopped. The sound of her friends' laughter dissolved into the air, the colors seemed to fade. Carol felt her heart drop, her trembling hands gripping the phone as if it might give another answer. But there was nothing else. Just that deafening silence that tore at her chest and turned love into doubt. For a moment, she thought it was a sick joke. She called him dozens of times, but every call went straight to voicemail. Each unanswered ring felt like a blow to the soul. Her carefully applied makeup began to smudge with the tears she couldn't hold back. Her mother rushed into the room, trying to understand what was happening, and the expression on her daughter's face was enough to silence any words. Donna Celia grabbed Carol by the shoulders, trying to convince her to cancel everything before the guests noticed. But her daughter was paralyzed, lost in a maze of thoughts clashing inside her mind. How could someone who promised eternal love simply disappear? The clock was ticking toward the wedding, and the sound of the sound truck playing the entrance music echoed outside. Cruel and ironic, as chaos unfolded outside, Carol studied her reflection in the mirror. The dress remained perfect, the smile planned, the image of a dreamy bride ready for the altar. But the woman in the mirror looked different, broken, confused, and yet, strangely, serene. Deep within her swollen eyes was a different spark, a light she didn't yet understand. Friends began to whisper outside. Some guests were already murmuring about the groom's disappearance. The catering staff awaited instructions, while photographers captured the awkward scene. The pressure was unbearable. Carol felt the weight of expectations, stares, and broken promises. But even amidst the chaos, an unlikely idea began to germinate. At first, she thought it was just despair, an emotional reaction to the pain. But as time passed, something inside her screamed that it wasn't fair to be defined by that abandonment. That her story didn't have to end on that empty altar. Fear gave way to clarity, and sadness began to transform into something else: determination. Carol wiped away her tears, took a deep breath, and stood up. Her mother tried to stop her, but she simply said, "Mom, I need to finish what I started." She walked to the door with slow but steady steps. Every meter she walked to the altar felt like a transition between the woman she was and the woman she was about to become. As the ballroom opened, the murmur of guests filled the air. Her white dress shimmered in the late afternoon light. Carol walked alone, bouquet in hand, her heart aflame. And in that moment, everyone knew something extraordinary was about to happen. The altar of abandonment, the silence was almost palpable. Everyone waited for an explanation, a cry, an escape, anything. But Carol kept walking, each step echoing between the pews like a drumbeat marking a new beginning. The groomless ceremony turned into a spectacle of courage no one could have anticipated. Arriving at the altar, she looked at the empty space where Raphael should have been. The flowers seemed to wilt under the weight of the void, and the light wind that blew brought a sudden chill. Carol took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and for the first time that day, smiled. Not a smile of joy, but of determination. Today I came here to say yes, she whispered softly, and the sound echoed among the guests. The whisper ceased. Everyone held their breath. Carol's mother clapped her hands to her mouth in disbelief. Yes, to myself, she added, lifting the bouquet with steady hands. The collective murmur turned to reverent silence. Someone began filming, and then, in that instant, fate was rewritten. Carol spoke of love, courage, and dignity. She said she had spent her entire life seeking acceptance, love, and validation from others, and that now, finally, she would choose herself. Every word felt like a manifesto, every tear like a vow. It was a wedding, yes, but the groom was her very soul. People began to get emotional. Some cried, others applauded timidly. The pain that had previously dominated the room transformed into something completely new, a mixture of awe, respect, and admiration. Carol ended her speech with a line that would become legendary: "If loving yourself is madness, then may I never be sane again." The video of that moment would spread around the world, but in that moment, she wasn't thinking about cameras or fame. She was thinking only of the peace she felt. For the first time in a long time, Carol wasn't hiding behind anyone. The altar, which should have been a symbol of abandonment, became the stage for her liberation. As she left the salon, the sky was beginning to darken. The sunset's light tinted the horizon golden lilac, reflecting exactly what Carol felt: the end of one cycle and the birth of another. Each step she took, alone, was a silent victory over shame, fear, and abandonment. The mother, still in shock, came over and held her daughter's hand. "Are you crazy?" she asked, trying to hide her tears. Carol simply replied with a calm smile, "No, Mom. I finally found myself." And in that moment, she knew, the most important wedding of her life had just happened. The decision no one expected, the echo of "yes to myself" still vibrated in the air. Some guests looked at each other, unsure whether to applaud. Others were already holding cell phones, recording Carol's every gesture. She walked calmly from the altar to the center of the hall. He seemed to guide his own story with millimeter steps. The master of ceremonies, astonished, asked if he should end the party. Carol took a deep breath and said no, gently. The music lowered, the lights became warmer, more welcoming. She asked for the microphone, her hands firm and warm. A new rite was born there, improvised, but inevitable. "I'm not going to run away from my life," he said, his voice clear. "Today I choose to honor all that I am and all that I can do." The word honor rang like a bell, long and clear. The hall, once a scene of shame, became sacred ground, and the lonely bride became the author, not the victim of chance. Donna Celia pressed her lips together, torn between fear and pride. He wanted to protect his daughter from the sharp tongues of the world, but he realized that the greatest danger had always been silence, the silence that imprisoned women in other people's expectations. So she dropped her shoulders and simply listened. Livia, the friend, approached with a discreet hug. "If you keep going, I'll be here, by your side," he whispered. Carol nodded. Her eyes moist but clear. There was a pact there, ancient and renewed, friendship as the foundation for a new beginning. A murmur rose as Carol held up the bouquet. There was no groom, but there were enough witnesses to the birth of a rare courage. She asked everyone to breathe along with her. 5 seconds of silence, and the room quieted down. "I promise to choose myself in difficult times," he declared. "I promise to treat myself with respect, patience, and truth. I promise not to beg for love where there is no shelter." Each sentence found a home in different hearts, and he collected tears from women who recognized themselves. Outside, the sky turned copper and violet. The wind shook the treetops slightly. A white butterfly landed on the wooden railing. Carol smiled, as if receiving a small signal. Life went on, and so would she. There was still fear. It hadn't magically disappeared, but now fear walked behind, not ahead. It was like an obedient shadow, without a commanding voice. The decision didn't erase the pain, it gave it shape, and with contouring, the pain can finally be overcome. When the first applause came, it was timid, then they grew. Gaining warm, long palms, Carol thanked him with a simple, whole wave. "There was nothing left to prove to anyone, just an open road, newly named after you." The most important vow. The mirror in the room reflected the woman and the dress. More than that, it reflected the mature decision. Livia adjusted her veil, as in any wedding, but there, the altar would be consciousness itself, and the celebrant, the inner voice that was always missing. Carol picked up a small, folded letter he had written in the morning, without knowing the future. There were promises for a lifetime. Promises that no one could take away from her, not even abandonment. Not even doubt. I, Carolina, promise to be there on cloudy days. I promise myself rest when the world demands haste. I promise myself tenderness when the mirror is cruel. And courage to start over. As many times as necessary. The words came out firmly, like foundation stones. She breathed in, feeling her chest slowly open. The body was still trembling, but another tremor was born, a sweet tremor, made of seed self-confidence, small, buried, insistent on piercing the ground. And look for the sun that was always there. Livia handed him a simple little ring, matte silver, no shine, no empty promises. Let it be a reminder, not a prison, he said. Carol put it on her finger, between a smile and a tear. It was light, like someone who learns not to squeeze. In the hall, the staff dimmed the lights again. A circle of people formed around. No benches, no carpet, no protocols. Just attentive faces and aligned breaths. A ritual of humanity, naked and loving. Today I celebrate the person I will always live with. The one who accompanies me in all my thoughts. Who knows my abysses and my bridges. That calls me back when I get lost. And that I choose to love with patience and truth. The applause that came this time was not euphoric, it was an applause of recognition and belonging, as if to say, I understand, I need it too. The women looked at each other, exchanging short nods. There was a church without walls, made of empathy. Outside, the first stars appeared. Carol stepped outside for a moment to feel the cold air. The dress brushed against the wood, making a delicate sound. She closed her eyes and listened to her own pulse. It marked a new, intimate, and stable rhythm. When he returned, a smile broke out effortlessly. It wasn't a victory over someone, it was a victory with them, a long reconciliation, which began there. Finally, Livia asked quietly if everything was okay. Yes, Carol said. I said yes to who I am. Enter the internet. The next morning the sun rose mercilessly bright. Carol was still lying down, her dress hanging on the armchair. The cell phone vibrated nonstop on the bedside table. She took a while to touch the device, fearing reality, but reality was already waiting for her in countless notifications. You are a legend, one comment read. Ridiculous, he did that to show off, said another. Between applause and insults, the story spread like wildfire. The wedding video went viral on all networks. The name Carol Martins was now a national issue. Livia arrived with coffee and a worried look. Have you seen this? It's everywhere. Carol picked up her cell phone, scrolled through the screen, and remained silent. Each section of the video was reproduced, dubbed, and commented on. Some cut out his words, others distorted the meaning. On news portals, conflicting headlines multiplied. Woman is left at the altar and gives a lesson in self-love. Bizarre wedding goes viral on social media and divides opinions. The internet, as always, mixed empathy and cruelty, and Carol, lost between laughter and pain, watched everything. What surprised her most was the proportion. Women from all over the world wrote heartfelt messages. They spoke of betrayals, abandonments, rediscoveries. They called her inspiration, living courage, and that, somehow, began to heal something in her. But sudden fame came at a high price. The company where Carol worked summoned her. The manager, in a cold voice, alleged undue exposure. He said that her image did not match the brand's standards, and the dismissal came as a second stab in the back. In just a few days, she returned home dazed, her eyes dry from crying. I just want peace, he murmured, looking at the ring on his finger. Livia hugged her and said, You've already started something, don't back down. Carol, not fully understanding, shook her head. He didn't know it yet, but his new life was just beginning. That night, she opened her laptop and stared at the screen for hours. He thought about writing a text, responding to the criticism, but he ended up typing just one sentence: loving yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And he clicked publish, not knowing what would come next. From shame to strength, the post exploded in likes and shares. Within hours, his inbox was full. Hundreds of women told their stories and asked for advice. Carol spent the day responding to each person with empathy. He felt, for the first time, that his pain had a purpose. Amidst the flood of messages, one caught my attention. It belonged to a woman named Nadia, from the interior of Para. She said, "I saw your video. I tried the same thing, but I gave up. Today, after seeing you, I promised myself never to give up again." Carol read it and cried as if she knew that stranger. Suddenly, everything made sense. Public humiliation took on new meaning. She hadn't been a failure, she had been a mirror. A reflection of what so many women felt and kept quiet, and now, through her, these voices gained body, but along with love came the gratuitous hate of the internet, cruel messages, jokes, memes and distortions. She just wants fame. Poor thing, she's lost her mind. Carol quickly learned how to deal with digital poison. I blocked, I breathed, I wrote another message of hope. Livia noticed the sparkle returning to her friend's eyes. "You're turning chaos into strength," he said, smiling. Carol smiled back, shy but confident. I was beginning to believe that I could do something bigger, something that would surpass his own pain. Days later, he received an unexpected invitation. A TV show wanted to interview her live. The theme, self-love and female courage. Fear tightened her chest, but something in her answered, yes, not out of vanity, but out of necessity. She rehearsed answers, choosing words carefully, but deep down he knew that the truth would be his best line. "I don't need to justify the love I felt for myself. I just need to continue being who I have become." These phrases spun in my mind like a mantra. The night before the interview, he could barely sleep. The white dress now rested in the closet. She looked at him with tenderness, not pain. It was a symbol, not a bitter memory. And with one last look, Carol turned off the light. Ready to start over. Professional ruin. The television studio seemed like a maze of lights and whispers. Carol took a deep breath, sitting in front of the makeup mirror. His heart was beating fast, his hands were cold with anxiety. "Are you ready?" the producer asked with a practiced smile. She just nodded, trying to control the lump in her throat. During the interview, the questions started out soft and polite, but soon came the harsh and insensitive comments. "Do you think marrying yourself is healthy? Wouldn't it just be a lack of courage disguised as courage?" Carol kept her gaze steady and responded calmly. "Neediness is when we need someone else to validate us. Courage is when we decide to be whole, even alone." The audience, which had been laughing before, gradually fell silent, and when she said she was fired after the viral video, the audience reacted with an indignant murmur. But what hurt the most was yet to come. That same week, Carol received legal notices. A client sued her, claiming image damage. He said the association with the ridiculous wedding had affected business. It was the final blow that made her burst into tears. She spent days without getting out of bed, immersed in exhaustion. The dark apartment, the cold coffee on the table, the ring on his finger now seemed too heavy. Maybe they were right, he muttered softly, but the echo of his own words sounded wrong. False. Livia appeared unexpectedly, carrying bags of food. "If you fall, all of this becomes meaningless, Carol. You became a beacon for many people, don't turn off that light." Carol cried on her friend's shoulder, without hiding her pain. "I knew I needed to react, but I didn't know how." That night, something changed. As I watched the wedding video again, saw not a broken woman, but someone brave. That Carol still existed, she was just tired, and she promised herself to find her again. The voice that is born. The next day, Carol opened the laptop once more, but now, not to read attacks, but to write. The words flowed like a confession kept inside for years. "I didn't get married out of desperation. I got married because I got tired of waiting to be chosen." He published the text and waited for silence, but a storm of support came. The post reached thousands of shares in just a few hours. Women from all over responded with gratitude. "You said what I always wanted to say, but never had the courage. Thank you for reminding me that I can start over." Messages filled the screen and Carol's heart. Soon, invitations began arriving. Magazines, podcasts and lectures requested his presence. But the most important thing came from a public school. A teacher wrote, "My students want to hear from you." Carol read it and smiled for the first time in days. She prepared carefully, as if it were another wedding, not with a white dress, but with hope. When she arrived at school, she saw teenagers waiting for her with paper flowers. "You are our inspiration," one of them said, emotionally. And there, Carol realized she had found her new altar. During the talk, he spoke about love, fear, and starting over. He told how a man's no became a woman's yes. He said that courage is not the absence of pain, it is persistence within it, and when she finished, the girls gave her a standing ovation. Through tears, Carol felt that ruin had become rebirth. Upon returning home, he received an unexpected email. A documentary producer wanted to tell his story. Carol hesitated, afraid of reliving it all again, but something inside her whispered, if it's to inspire, go. And this time, she didn't doubt her own voice. Sitting on the porch, looking at the horizon, she realized that the fear was still there, but different. Now it served as a compass, not a chain. He closed his eyes and gave silent thanks. The woman who once felt humiliated now inspired the world. The past comes to light. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, interrupting Carol's writing. It was a shaky voice on the other end of the line. We need to talk. She recognized it immediately. It was Bianca, an old friend. The voice hesitated, as if carrying a burden that was too heavy. It's about Raphael. I can't keep this in anymore. Carol's heart froze for a moment. The name she had banished from herself echoed again. Bianca took a deep breath before continuing. He didn't leave you out of fear. He left you because he was with me. 4 months. The world spun slowly, and the words seemed to come from underwater. Carol let the phone slip from her hand. The room was silent except for the distant sound of traffic. The body trembled, not in surprise, but in recognition. She had always felt there was something hidden in that escape, and now, finally, the truth emerged, raw and cutting. In the following days, memories came flooding back, old messages, suspicious looks, disguised delays. Everything made sense now, and at the same time, nothing did. The betrayal was old, but the wound seemed newly opened. She realized there was still anger alive beneath the scar. Livia tried to distract her, take her for a walk in the park, but Carol barely listened, lost in bitter thoughts. He destroyed me and didn't even have the courage to look me in the eye. The words came out low, but full of fire. I should expose him. Show everyone who he is. That night, Carol opened her laptop with steady hands. He began to write an explosive text, full of pain and revenge. He typed fast, tears streaming down his face, his chest on fire, but with each sentence, the ring on her finger seemed to weigh more. She stopped, took a breath, and asked herself, is it worth it? He erased everything, one line at a time, until nothing was left but emptiness. The emptiness was painful, but also clean. She knew that taking revenge would mean remaining trapped, that hate would just be another way of chaining the heart. And then, for the first time, he chose silence. Forgiveness had not yet come, but the desire for peace had. Carol lay down, looked at the ceiling and whispered to the darkness, I will not define myself by his cowardice. The voice came out shaky, but convinced, and sleep came as a relief, soft and deserved. The next morning she wrote something new. Those who hurt me taught me to be strong, whoever betrayed me taught me to be whole, and whoever left taught me to stay with me. The text went viral, and the healing began, silent but real. Between anger and forgiveness, the following days were spent introspection. Carol avoided interviews and refused invitations. I wanted silence, time, ground. I spent hours on the porch, watching the wind in the trees. It was as if the world breathed through her. Livia arrived one afternoon with a letter in her hands. He sent me this, asked me to deliver it. Carol hesitated, her heart racing. I don't want to know, he said, turning his face away, but stubborn curiosity whispered, read and finish. The letter was short, cowardly, and predictable. Raphael apologized, saying he was sorry. He tried to justify the unjustifiable, with worn-out words, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted to thank you for your courage. Carol read it, sighed, and left the folded paper on the table. She didn't feel hate, she felt pity, for his weakness, for the life he chose to flee, for giving up on loving what I couldn't control. It was the strangest and most liberating moment of all. The old pain now seemed like a distant memory. That night, Carol went to the beach alone. The sea was pounding, reflecting the silver moon. She walked to where the water touched her feet, and there, with the waves as witnesses, he said aloud, I forgive you. But not for you. For me. The words were carried away by the wind and foam, and something inside her broke, but this time, For the better. The anger came out like smoke, light, almost sweet, the chest opened, the air entered new and clean, and Carol, for the first time, felt truly free. Back home, she wrote in her diary, "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is stopping carrying." It wasn't easy, but I learned to let go of what was weighing me down. These sentences became the center of his new lecture, and the topic changed. Now she was talking about liberation. The following week, the documentary began filming. The cameras followed her around the city, but she didn't act. He spoke calmly, truthfully, and gratefully. "I was left at the altar, yes. But I stuck with it until the end." The team was moved. And the story gained soul. On the last day of filming, the director asked, "Would you marry again?" Carol smiled, looked at the ring and replied, "With me, every day. With someone else, only if they understand what that means." And the whole studio laughed, light, heartfelt, real. The New Journey, the documentary premiered on a local streaming platform. Carol didn't expect much, maybe some kind comments, but within the first 24 hours, the video reached millions of views. The title said, "The Bride Who Said Yes to Herself." And with him, a new phase began, bigger than she imagined. The messages came back, but this time they were different. They didn't come from curious people, but from excited women. "You saved me at a time when I thought about giving up. After your video, I left an abusive relationship." Each story sent was an echo of courage. Carol realized she needed to channel that. He took out his cell phone and created a simple video channel. He called it Free Mirror, a space for speech and healing. There, he told real stories, reflections, and small victories. The channel's first sentence, "You don't need to be chosen to exist." The success was instantaneous and organic. In just a few months, the channel became a reference in self-love. Brands, programs, and lectures began to seek her out. But Carol was careful. She didn't want to become a product. "I wanted to continue being a bridge between pain and liberation." In one of his live broadcasts, someone asked, "Are you still angry with him?" She smiled, thought for a second and replied, "No. Because anger is a chain. And I choose to walk lightly." The chat filled with virtual hearts and tears. Over time, Carol became a symbol of overcoming, but he never forgot where he came from, or the empty altar floor. She carried it as a reminder, not as a wound, and with each new video, she felt more whole, more human, as if, finally, she had found the meaning of having been left. One night, alone on the balcony, she looked at the stars. He thought of the women who watched his videos in silence, in those who cried in secret, in those who started again in secret, and he murmured, "If my story made someone stand up, then it was worth it." The tears this time were sweet, of gratitude. The interview that changed everything. A year after marrying herself, the invitation arrived. One of the biggest TV shows in the country wanted to interview her. Self-love and female empowerment. Carol hesitated for a moment, remembering the first interview, but he felt inside that it was time to end the cycle. In the dressing room, the production team was talking excitedly. "You're a phenomenon, Carol. Are you ready?" She laughed, adjusting the microphone clip to her simple dress. "This time, yes. Not to prove anything, to say thank you." The heart was beating calmly, unlike the anxiety from before. When she entered the stage, the audience received her standing up. The lights blinded her for a second, and the past flashed by. The altar, the bouquet, the message of abandonment, it all came at once, but she took a deep breath and walked to the center of the stage. There, under the spotlight, she felt at peace. The presenter began with a curious smile. "Carol, what was going through your mind that day?" She thought, looked at the audience and answered slowly, "I just thought that if I didn't say yes to myself, no one would." The entire studio fell silent, and then applauded. The conversation was light, honest, full of emotion. He talked about fear, starting over, and forgiveness, about how self-love is not selfishness, it is a necessity. When you learn to love yourself, the world stops swallowing you. His words floated in the air like a modern prayer. Behind the scenes, the producers wept discreetly. The public on social media reacted with genuine emotion. "This woman changed my life," commented one viewer. "She is proof that there is a way out of rock bottom," said another. And Carol, back in the dressing room, felt her heart vibrate with gratitude. That night, the video of the interview went viral worldwide, but this time, not out of scandal, out of inspiration. Thousands of people started the movement #DigaSimPraCMesma, and Carol realized it wasn't just a story anymore, it was a symbol of new beginnings. Of faith, of freedom. She turned off her cell phone, looked at the ring on her finger and smiled. He thought of Raphael, of Bianca, of the old pain, and nothing hurt, just compassion and distance. Maybe fate only broke me to rebuild me better. And with that certainty, she fell asleep peacefully. The world applauds. The video of the interview spread around the world like light in a dark night. International newspapers told the story of the bride who chose herself. Artists, psychologists, and influencers shared their words. A #DigaSimPraCMesma became a global movement, but for Carol, true success lay in the silence of the early morning hours. The messages of gratitude kept coming. Women sent videos with simple rings and mirrors in their hands. "I married myself today, inspired by you," said one of them. Another wrote, "Thank you for showing me that I am not the mistake, I am the new beginning." Carol read everything with tears in her eyes and a light heart. The documentary won a Social Impact Award, and, on the stage of the ceremony, she ascended with humility and tenderness. "This award isn't mine," he said, his voice breaking. "It belongs to all the women who have learned not to apologize for existing." The audience rose to their feet, applauding for long minutes. Livia cried in the front row, proud and smiling. "I knew every tear that woman had shed in silence. I knew the weight of what it meant to smile now." Carol looked at her and made a heart gesture with her hands. It was a wordless but soulful thank you. Over time, fame turned into something calm. The apparitions diminished, the lights became softer. Carol realized she didn't need to be everywhere. His legacy was already walking on its own, in each woman he touched. The movement now belonged to the world. One quiet morning, he received an unexpected invitation. A university invited her to give a keynote lecture. Love as a silent revolution. She accepted, smiling, not out of vanity, but out of gratitude. It was beautiful to see destiny sowing meaning where there was once a wound. In the packed auditorium, students listened to her in deep silence. She told how the cruelest no became the most important yes. And he concluded, "When you understand your value, the world reorganizes itself around you." The applause echoed like a blessing, full of warmth. Carol left the stage with her heart at peace and her eyes clear. That evening, back home, she sat in front of the mirror. The same mirror that saw her shattered, now saw her whole. She took off the ring, looked at it for a moment, and put it back on, not as a promise, but as a reminder. "I have kept my vows," she whispered, emotionally. The world was still applauding outside, but inside her, the sound was different, soft, serene, internal. The greatest victory was not in the spotlight, but in stillness. Carol, after all, didn't need to prove anything. It was just her, whole, sufficient, real. The silence after the storm. Time passed, and life quieted down around us. The noise of the networks decreased, invitations became rare, but Carol didn't miss it. She felt relief. The calm had a sweet and well-deserved flavor. It was the harvest of those who went through chaos and flourished. Mornings now began with coffee and plants. She tended a small garden on the balcony. He watered flowers with the same delicacy he learned to give himself. The sound of falling water resembled a calm heartbeat. Each new leaf was a reminder of rebirth. Sometimes I looked at the scars that time had left, not like wounds, but like trail marks. Each one told a part of the walk there. I survived myself. She thought, smiling, and that thought was the most liberating of all. A rainy night brought back old memories. Carol put on some soft music and turned off the lights. He lay down on the sofa, listening to the sound of rain on the window. The mind traveled to the altar, the dress, the abandonment, but for the first time, it didn't hurt. It was just a memory. He picked up the old diary and read the first entries. Today he left. I got lost. Today I said yes. I think I found myself. Every sentence seemed to be written by two different women, and at the same time, for the two who were now one. Livia visited her over the weekend with a gift, a small mirror with a delicate golden frame. "So you never forget who saved you," he said, smiling. Carol held the mirror, her eyes filled with tears. "I never forget, Liv. She looks at me every morning." On Sunday, Carol went to the beach alone. The wind was cold, the sea calm, the sand damp. She walked barefoot, feeling the freedom under her feet. He closed his eyes and gave silent thanks. for being left, and for staying with you. Back home, he lit a candle in the bedroom. The flame flickered softly, reflected in the mirror. The ring shone discreetly, without any weight. She smiled and wrote the last line of the diary. I am not the one who was left alone. I am the one who learned to be whole. And when he blew out the candle, the room was plunged into peace, no sound, no memory, no missing, just silence, the same silence that had once frightened her. Now it was shelter, not absence. It was home, and Carol was finally at home within herself. A new beginning. 2 years have passed since that day at the altar. The world had changed, and so had Carol. The movement #DigaSimPraCMesma had spread across dozens of countries. Books, lectures, and campaigns were inspired by his story. But more than all of this, she lived in peace, finally in peace. The morning sun streamed in through the window of the new apartment. The white walls were covered with photos and dried flowers. There was sincere laughter, hugs, trips, and new beginnings. On the table lay a newly released copy, The Most Important Yes, by Carol Martins. The book was not about the pain, but about what came after, about how self-love is not a destination. It is a daily practice. It is choosing oneself even when the world demands otherwise, said the preface. In bookstores, women took photos with it in their hands, and Carol observed everything with humility, feeling part of something bigger. At the launch event, the auditorium was packed. Familiar and unfamiliar faces mingled together. Livia, as always, was in the front row, with teary eyes. Carol took the stage with the same serene smile. Thank you for letting me share a piece of my heart with you. After the autographs, the audience began to disperse. She was putting away her pens when a soft voice called out to her. Carol? Said a man, standing in front of the table. He had calm eyes and a discreet smile. I read your book. I think you taught me what real love is. Carol looked up, curious and calm. There was sincerity there, and nothing more. No rush, no promises, just presence. Thank you, she replied, without hesitation, but I'm still learning, every day. They talked for a few minutes, lightly, without pretense. He said he had also experienced a painful abandonment, and that his book would help him find himself again. Carol smiled, recognizing that tired, grateful look. Then maybe you said yes to yourself too. Outside, dusk tinted the sky orange and pink. They walked to the door together in comfortable silence. The light wind ruffled her hair. And she laughed. It was a free, new laugh, without any weight, the kind of laughter that only comes after healing. Before they said goodbye, he said with a smile, Can I invite you for coffee sometime? Carol thought for a moment and replied sweetly, You can. But don't rush. I like stories that move slowly. He smiled back, understanding the tone. No promises, just possibilities. Back in the empty auditorium, she glanced at the decorative mirror in the entryway. He saw his reflection illuminated by the light of the sunset. Lightly touched the ring he still wore. Symbol, not prison. I still say yes, he murmured, his heart at ease. And, for the first time, that yes was also an invitation to the future. As he left, the wind blew like a blessing. The trees danced, her steps were firm and smooth. The past was a road, not a burden. Love was home, not search. And Carol, smiling at the horizon, knew life was just beginning.